here to talk about graduate school interviews. So the program I applied for was school psychology, which is also a specialist degree in education. And I applied at Florida State University and the University of Central Florida. And for like my background, my college GPA so far is a 3.6 overall, and then my GRE is a 308, and I got a 151 on the quantitative and a 157 on the verbal. Some of my undergraduate experiences that are like relative to school psychology are being a lifeguard for 4 years, being a swim instructor for 3 years. I tutored at an elementary school for a while, and I took care of kid care at the elementary school for a while, so like those are my experiences like hands-on with kids. Okay, so I had the FSU interview first, so I'll start with that one. It was group interviews there, and there were about 24 people like there with me. Because at FSU it was an all-day situation, so I came there at like 9 a.m. and I was late. And so we sit down, they give us like a presentation kind of like about their college, about school psychology and all that good stuff in their program specifically. And then there were 3 rounds of interviews, and I was with about 6 other people in my interview. So when we sat down first, it was with one of like the heads of the program, like the lady who runs the program, and she would just kind of throw out questions, and then whoever wanted to answer it could answer it. So her questions were more of like the questions I was expecting to get. So like, why do you want to be a school psychologist? Why do you want to go to FSU? What do you like about our program specifically? Like all those questions that you expect to get when you go to an interview. And I was the first person to answer the first question, so I felt positive about that because I was really anxious for the whole thing. And so I was just riding this balance of like speaking and then making sure I wasn't like the only one speaking, and like, you know, I didn't want to make it seem too like, ooh, pick me, you know, like I was playing it cash. But I answered like 3 out of the 4 questions she asked, and I felt good about all of my answers in that interview, and I thought I was doing pretty good. And then we moved to the next interview, and our next interview was with a girl who was in the doctorate program there, and she was like finishing her doctorate degree, and she was like a GA or whatever. And her questions were not really questions I was prepared for. The one I remember, because I think she asked 2, and the one I remember the most was like, what's a travel experience that shaped how you view like school psychology or psychology? And I just felt like it was kind of a weird question because like traveling cost a lot of money, and like I felt like it was like a very weird question. I answered that question last, and I really gave not a good answer. It was not good. And the other question she asked was something similar, and it was not going good. It was not good. And it was average. Not good though. Didn't feel positive. And then we moved on to the 3rd interview, and that was with, I think, another lady who like teaches in the program. And she asked questions like, what do you think hot topics or big issues in school psychology are now? Why are you passionate about being a school psychologist? And this one was kind of different because it was more like, why don't you want to be a teacher, and why do you want to be a school psychologist? Because they're both impacting students' lives. So like, what is it about this specific field? And just different questions like that. And those ones I felt pretty good about. But, you know, that one was like average. So I feel like the first one went really good, the second one not so great, and then the last one like pretty average. But overall with it, like I was feeling pretty okay. And then after that, we just did after that we actually had lunch with some of the second years that are in the program. And then after that, we did a tour of, it was supposed to be a full campus tour, but it started raining. So we just did like a little miniature tour of the building that we're going to be in most of the time anyways. And then after that, we got to leave early, and it was great and positive. And then for UCF. So UCF, they do a 4-on-1 interview. So the people that conducted my interview were like the head of the program, I think the other head of the program, a past alumni, and then a teacher in their special education program, I believe. And so I had a 15-minute time slot for that interview too. So it's like, it's 4-on-1, you have 15 minutes, like you don't have all day to impress these people, so like you gotta get to the point. So I walked in, and as I'm like walking to the door, it's the special education lady who like comes to get each of the interviewees, and she was like, listen, just get in there, smile, you'll do fine. And I was like, okay. So I go in there and I'm like, hello. And they all introduce themselves to me and like who they are, and then I introduce myself back. And I thought it would be really scary doing 4-on-1, especially since at the FSU interview, there were people who had already done the UCF interview, and they were like, it was so scary, like blah, blah, blah. So I already kind of had things in my head like, oh no, like this is not going to be good. But I kind of learned you shouldn't exactly listen to those types of things. Like you can take it, but take it with a grain of salt, and then like go into it with your own experience, not already biased from what someone else said. Because when I went in there, I thought all 4 of the people were super nice. And so the first person who asked me a question was the alumni member. And so I actually have the questions because I wrote them down because I was like, that would be smart. So they each asked me 2 questions. Each of the 3. The 4th lady was just like taking notes. So she asked me, why do you want to be a school psychologist? And she also asked me, why UCF? And so for UCF's program, like FSU has all like normal day classes, and UCF has all night classes because it's more tailored for someone who's going to like work in the day and then go to school at night. So I just kind of answered like, I like the flexibility, blah, blah, blah. And then the second head of the program said, tell me about our program. And that question I was really not prepared for, even though I really should have been, because I was like, I know things about your program, but I felt like when they asked that question, they were like looking for something in particular, and I was like, I do not know. But I mean, I think they liked how I answered the question anyways, because I just said like basic stuff about pretty much all of the school psychology programs, which is like their 3-year programs. 2 of the years are courses, and then the last year is like, I forget what you call it, but like the hands-on experience. And then I said like they have all night classes and like X, Y, and Z. And I think they were fine with that. And then he asked, what would you do if you couldn't become a school psychologist? And I basically said I would go into psychology research, or I might become an educator, but I would probably lean more towards staying in psychology than staying in education. And I was just like honest about it, because I also wasn't prepared for that question. So that was really just like my honest, like, here we go, answer. And then the last guy asked me, what are some important traits of a school psychologist and why? And I basically just said being able to balance several things, being able to handle all of the stress with the job, time management, and being able to keep track of like everything that you have to do. Things you would expect, really. And then he said, this is a very stressful job. What are some of the ways that you de-stress? And so I basically just said like some of my hobbies. So I was like, I would do photography because that's something I've been into for like the past 1.5 years that I'm really passionate about. And then I also said like journaling and just like writing down and then externalizing like all of the things going on. And he seemed to really like those answers. And then at the end of the interview, when they ask you to ask them questions, basically, I said, what's unique or special about your program? And then I also asked, what are some of the key characteristics or traits of students in your graduate program? And I thought those were like really good questions to ask, because also he seemed to like really enjoy that I asked like good questions. So those were my interviews. And then just like some more basic things, FSU's program, they allow 12 people in their cohort, and UCF allows 16 people in their cohort, so they're both like very, very small programs. And I got into UCF literally the day after my interview. I was so nervous about it, whatever. And then he emails me the next day, like the head of the program, and is like, hey, like, oh, okay, my hair looks horrible. Is like, hey, you're in. And I was like, that's crazy. And FSU came out with their decisions at like the same time, and I didn't get into their program at first. And the deadline for like saying, the deadline for making your decision like back to them was April 15th. So I was like, okay, I got into UCF, I didn't get into FSU, like I'm gonna go to UCF. And then before the April 15th deadline, FSU comes back to me and is like, hey, we've made a spot for you in our program, like do you want to come to our program? And I was like, because we weren't supposed to, like, if you were, I wasn't declined, I was put on the wait list. So if you were put on the wait list, you weren't supposed to find out if they could make a spot for you until after April 15th. So the fact that they like had that spot for me before the April 15th deadline, I was like, okay. Because I really like their program because it's smaller, it's during the day, and I feel like it's more tailored for like younger people like my age, instead of like, I feel like UCF, not that it's necessarily this way, but I feel like it's more for like, you're coming back, you need to have a job, like X, Y, and Z. And I'm just prepared to take out loans, so it's fine, everything's fine. So that's basically everything about how my interviews went, what my interview experience was. So thanks for watching, subscribe. I'm adding this part into the video literally just to tell you that I managed to thrift the exact same sweater that my boyfriend has for $5. And he literally cried and screamed in the Goodwill because he was like, I'm thriftable! So, fun fact.